Hello, my name is Alex, and the claim I'm responding to today is playing an instrument significantly increases a person's intelligence. And over the next few minutes, I'll be refuting the opponent's secondary claims of 1, musical training improves memory and cognitive thinking. 2, learning music has the same principles as learning a new language. And 3, musical training stimulates the brain. And my claim would be that the proponent fails to provide adequate evidence demonstrating a significant increase in intelligence from playing an instrument. So my response to the first secondary claim, an article titled "Music Lessons May Boost IQ and Grades" by the American Psychological Association was used, which elaborated on a recent study regarding the significant increase in IQ with small children while learning how to sing or play the piano. However, this article was only touched on by the proponent. It was not fully or properly analyzed. The quote used was, lead researcher E. Glenn Schellenberg, PhD, says, the recent study builds on work he published in 2004 in which 6-year-olds given a year of voice or piano lessons saw a significantly larger increase in IQ than a control group that waited a year for musical instruction. This was probably the second paragraph of the article, and a crucial piece of statistical data from the study was excluded. And the quote is, the study involving the younger children found that each additional month of music lessons was accompanied by an increase of an IQ of 1/6 of a point, such that 6 years of lessons was associated with an increase in IQ of 7.5 points, compared with children who did not have the same amount of musical instruction. So in this study, it was testing children from the ages of 6 to 11, which is a range of 6 years, and where the number 7.5 IQ points came from is the average difference between the between the range. And the conclusion from this statistic was a transfer fallacy of composition, in which they took the average monthly increase in IQ over a study of a year, and they projected an estimated increase over another 5 years, which is an unreasonably and insufficient data sample. And further on in the article, it states that for the college, there was another study that went alongside this, alongside the study of children, which tested adolescents, which tested teenagers ranging from an age of adolescence to the freshman year of college. And for the college students, 6 years of playing music regularly as a child predicted an increase of 2 points in IQ over their peers, which 2 points in IQ is not a lot over 6 years. And also another article was used titled "Music Makes You Smarter" was found on the woodwind and brass site. This article was featured in order to propel this article was propelled in a biased manner. So the quote used from my opponent in the argument was, throughout the country, students who perform in school bands consistently score higher grade point averages than even senior citizens who play musical instruments, making a distinctly stronger brain function and their non-musical peers. Studies have suggested that exposing a child to music early in their lives can positively impact their IQ, reading level, and brain development. Adults who learn an instrument also benefit greatly due to heightened alertness, elevated activity, and the overall joy it can bring to the daily routine. So I looked more into the site, and it turns out that Woodwind and Brass is a site that specializes in selling band and orchestra instruments. And what was left out from the quote in the argument was the part that school bands, or that students who perform in school bands consistently score higher grade point averages. I mean, for a site that makes a profit off of selling and advertising expensive instruments, it would completely make sense that they would that they would support, that they would say something like this to further their sales. Also going to the secondary claim. A secondary claim of fact is introduced stating now that learning a new language increases a person's intelligence. From the article, learning a new language at any age helps the brain on the life science side. So the quote used was, in a new study, bilingual young adults perform better in ignoring irrelevant stimuli and focusing on relevant information. One possible reason for this ability is that the very processes of learning two languages and switching back and forth between them train the brain to be more attuned to auditory information. So the proponent made an attempt to establish evidence that learning how to play an instrument and learning a new language are both activities that stimulate brain activity and makes one smarter. However, they were proposed independently from one another. And the grounds that warrants the logical leap that learning an instrument reaps the same benefits as learning a new language is nowhere to be found. And furthermore, on the weakness of the claim was that circular reasoning was found by begging the question that music has the same principles as learning a new language. And this was done so by stating that learning to read music and learning to read a new language are the same thing, which was repeated multiple times, and that there are rules within music as well in language without offering any evidence to back this up. The third secondary claim, biased authoritative evidence was used. The quote used was, Dartmouth music psychologist Petru Janata published research in the journal Science where he confirmed that music has a greater effect than any other stimulus to enhance connections between the brain's right and left hemispheres, as well as the areas where memories and emotions develop. So for a psychologist that has an emphasis on music and has every reason to promote and encourage music, just seemed a little too eager and a little too biased to say that music is the absolute best way to stimulate and enhance the brain. So overall, it's kind of difficult to it's difficult to argue against argue that there were disadvantages or that there aren't any advantages to learning to play an instrument. However, the argument made however, the advantages of playing an instrument is not as significant as it was made out to be, and the overall argument made was it weakened the notion overall. Thank you.
All right, it takes you a little time to get through the whole argument. I think you're doing way too much summarizing of the advocate's evidence. In fact, you reread several of the pieces, and that's problematic. I think you need to get directly to the criticism of the evidence, suggesting on the first point, for instance, that context was left out and that the statistical process that they used is invalid. And I think you've got a good argument there if you would explain it and make a declarative statement on that particular point. I think, like I said, you got caught up in looking at the advocate's evidence a little bit too much. The argument about a transfer fallacy, I think you explained that pretty well. I'm not sure that that's exactly what the research did. You seem to describe it that way, so that would be the reason that I would say that that's a good argument. Assuming that your description is accurate, then I think you've got a good piece of analysis there. On the second study, your criticism of it is, pretty simple. 6 years of doing work on this and get you 2 points of extra IQ. That seems like a lot of effort. By the way, I think there's probably a good premise argument here that says IQ scores are not very indicative of intelligence, and their reliability for measures of intelligence should be questioned. Because I've heard lots of criticism of IQ, but you're going so directly for this one thing that I think you're missing a bigger picture issue on that. I understand the bias issue on the the woodwinds and brass argument, suggesting that here's a commercial site that sells this particular product that is now advocating the notion that the product that they sell has some potential benefit for them, that we should look at that with suspicion. I think that that's a reasonable challenge to make. That it means that it is an illegitimate argument, I think that's a little bit problematic. I don't remember what the advocate's evidence was in terms of what the significance on the GPA difference was, just that there was a difference, whether or not it's measurable. On the second point, that really seems to me to be the a contradictory argument. All kinds of brain activity are going to have an effect on your intelligence, and so why is music unique if learning a language does the same thing, and there might be other brain, playing puzzles or doing some kind of video game or reading or writing, why those things not produce the same outcome? What is it that's unique about music, and how significant is that uniqueness? I think that's where the conflict is on this point. I'm not sure that the second point gets anybody anything. You say it's circular, and I say, okay, well, that might be true. I think your challenge of bias on the last point is a little misguided. The notion that because a psychologist specializes in a particular area suggests that they're only going to see that area in a particular way, I think is really problematic. That's like saying, geez, the doctor saw that you were sick, and so because he's a doctor and treats sick people, you're biased in some way. I don't think that's a reasonable interpretation of what bias is in that particular issue. Delivery issues, some of the same things. Your voice level drops out sometimes. I think you need a little bit more energy. All right.